Hey, I'm Jim Weber in the Fox 13 Weather Center, and thanks for logging on to MyFoxHurricane.com. So we now have Hurricane Grace down in the Caribbean. It is strengthened up to hurricane force through the overnight hours. A big ramp up in that convection. You can see as you watch that loop, the enhanced satellite loop go on, you see a big burst of convection strengthening as it worked its way on towards the west. And that was something that we talked about yesterday, that as it moved on to the west, it moved away from some land areas. It would be moving over some very warm water, so it had plenty of energy to work with. The wind shear would be decreasing over the system, so we were going to see this system strengthen. That is exactly what we are seeing with it. Here's another view, the visible satellite imagery, just amazing imagery here, just from the scientific perspective. This is 1 minute imagery, high resolution from the GOES satellite. So what you're doing, you're taking a snapshot every single minute. And you can actually just kind of watch how things just percolate with this. So really interesting view there as it works its way on towards the west. So here's the latest information. Winds right now are at 75 miles an hour. It continues to work its way towards the west, moving to the west-northwest at 15 miles an hour. So as we go through the next, say, 24 hours or so, it's working its way over some very warm water. About the only thing that's going to slow it down is it is still dealing with a little bit of wind shear. That is certainly lessened, but there's still some wind shear and then some drier air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, so that may tend to slow it down a little bit as well. That's why at least the official forecast is showing strengthening. They're just not showing it strengthening as quickly as it might, but if it could overcome some of those, we certainly could see this strengthen even more. So working its way over the Yucatan. Obviously, as it moves over the Yucatan, it will weaken somewhat, but then re-intensify once it makes its way back out over water. And looks like as we get into the weekend, making landfall across Mexico. Now, here's the other one, Tropical Storm Henri. Pretty small system, and this is still dealing with some of that wind shear. And again, this is seeing lower wind shear. That is starting to decrease as well, but it does look like it'll continue to be dealing with that as we go through the next several days. Same idea with this, which has been going on for several days now. We have the ridge to the north. That will be sliding on towards the east a bit. Developing low, a trough across the U.S. will help to steer this system as we get a few days out. So the short term, it's moving towards the west, and then it makes that right-hand turn and eventually heads back out to sea. And as it does so, it does look like it will have that chance to strengthen somewhat. But notice what's in the cone. Parts of, say, Long Island up towards Massachusetts, you're seeing it's still in the cone. So some of the computer models at least indicating that we may actually see high pressure redeveloping to the north of this system. If that were to happen, they may help to steer this back closer to the coastline. That's why they have to watch very closely, because if this were to take a more westward track, this would keep it much closer to the west coast. But obviously we'll be dealing with some swells along the west coast as we head through the weekend. So here's another view of this. Looking at the GFS, we've got, here I'll go ahead and circle the areas. Here's Henri, here is Grace. Notice the big ridge that is basically steering everything along. We put it into motion, and you can see what's happening. We continue to watch Grace working its way pretty much on that due westerly track, and in the short term, we've got Henri basically continuing to ride beneath that ridge. As that ridge weakens, notice you get a bit of a weakness here. Here's that trough developing, which will allow this system to steer a bit more towards the north eventually, and eventually towards the northeast. Now, if this ridge is a bit stronger, or we see that building back to the north, that may change that track a little bit. So we're going to continue to watch this pretty closely. And of course, we'll keep you updated right here on MyFoxHurricane.com.